Hello, welcome to the kitchen garden module. In this module we're going to be looking at the considerations with the design of a kitchen garden and looking at some of the techniques that you can apply to do it. So to start this module we'll look at the guiding considerations of how the different parts that we've covered so far as building soil, applying the permaculture principles and the design process apply to different types of permaculture designs. And the first one we're going to apply it to is the kitchen garden design. So the main idea here is that we want to be able to apply agricultural or garden practices in a way that are going to make the base resources better over time and are going to protect those resources. So those resources are based in the soil. And in the soil, there's a couple of things we can do in how we manage our system to improve the conditions in the soil, which are going to increase the production of our system over time, make it more stable, make it more resilient. And with whatever type of design we are trying to do, whether it's a kitchen garden or an orchard or a broadacre design, we want to align our management practices in a way that is going to improve our base resource. So the things that are going to improve the soil system is going to be the health of the plant. So whatever we do in the system, we want to get the plants growing as well as possible. So improve health of plants. And depending on the system, we might do that in different ways, but we generally are just trying to get that plant to grow as healthily as possible. The second thing is to protect the soil, so either create a compost mulch or a living mulch. So mulch or living plants. And the idea of that is to stop UV radiation and weathering of the soil, which is going to degrade the habitat for those soil organisms, so it's going to protect it. So I have got a list here of all the different considerations that are generally being used to inform a kitchen garden design. And they are based around the idea that when you go to a kitchen garden site, what are the different elements that will guide the design that you apply. So there's a couple of different points in relation to that. So the first one is obviously what you want. So what are your individual preferences as far as what you grow, or if you're doing it commercially, what is the market opportunities in that available? So what will people want to eat? And making sure that they are aligned with the climatic considerations of the particular site. So the best way to go about that normally is to have a look around neighbouring gardens, so get to know some local gardeners and learn from them as to what grows well in your particular conditions, and that will be dependent upon the climate and the topography and the soil conditions. And generally people who have been doing it for the last 10-20 years will know pretty well through trial and error what will grow quite well in your kind of local conditions. So that's always a good place to start. You can research things online and get a sense of what grows well in conditions similar to yours. You can see what's available to source. You might have heritage plant providers or local garden centres where you can source plants from. And once you've got a bit of a list of things that should do quite well in your site, you can then start to organise from that list what you would like best to grow yourself, and use that as a context for your design. So generally, before starting your design, it's good to get an idea about what it is you want to grow and what will grow well. So the second thing is the space available. So different sites will have different opportunities for their design. If it's a very small in space, if it's an apartment or a very, an eighth of an acre section, you are going to approach the design of that section quite differently if it's a quarter acre or a half acre section, and you'll employ quite different techniques. So Generally, you might take on board 3 different strategies there. If it's a very limited space available to you, you might want to do very high intensity or vertical gardening. So you might want to, if it's a limited space, do things like aquaponic systems, which are probably the most efficient small space production system that you can do. So that would be, you can do it different ways, but you might just have a little glass house with grow beds of gravel and water's being pumped up from fish tanks below those grow beds, or maybe even on a pond beside it. So that would require quite a small space, just the area of the glass house. And it was very productive because of the heat of the glass house, the fertility of the aquaponics system, and the plants being constantly irrigated as well. So the plants grow at an optimal rate. So for a small space, aquaponics are brilliant. And vertical gardening might also be a consideration. So that's growing things up walls. So if you're in an apartment, for example, and you're very limited to what you can grow, and you have maybe a small space at the back of the apartment, or even a little ledge where it overlooks things, you could set up a vertical system in there. Potentially too, a little aquaponic system might best fit into that space. But the bigger your area is, the more opportunities you have to do different techniques and fit different things into that space. So the next kind of level of space is generally your raised kitchen garden beds. And they're your common type that you often see. So that would be your timber-lined, compost-filled garden bed, and that's quite an intensive small space productive system. And it would be dependent upon the import of a lot of materials to supplement the health and the nutrients in that system. So it's a little bit divorced from a more balanced biology-based system. But if you go up in space again, then you've got more space for so formed beds or orchards even, and to integrate animal systems. So you're getting more opportunity to incorporate different things into your design with more space. Although often it's a case of imagination. So animals, for example, you may not think you have much opportunity to have them if it's just a house with very little section. But I've seen designs where you can have rabbits, for example, on runs around the outside of the house or even underneath the house. And it's a way of incorporating an animal system into your system, and eat the rabbits as a form of food in quite a small space. So yeah, once you've got an idea of what you want to grow, what grows well in your site, what space you've got available, then it starts to filter into the particular dynamics of what you're going to do. Alright, so the sun axis is also another important consideration. It's where the sun's coming from, and that will be affected by the orientation of your garden towards the sun and any shading from any existing structures on the site. So these two kind of go quite hand in hand. So sun axis is an interesting one. It's so the ideal situation might be a property where you've got a north-facing site. So a nice big north-facing garden section that might be placed in front of your house with a little driveway coming down to it. And in this space here, you've got nice all-day sunshine, as long as there's not a big fence along the front. But with late afternoon sunshine, you might want to do a bit of privacy screening that will also cast a bit of late afternoon shade upon your garden to help protect those species from too much direct sunlight in the heat of the afternoon. If these were deciduous trees, that would be particularly beneficial because they'd lose their leaves in winter when you want to get as much sunlight as possible because the light intensity is quite low. But in summer, when the light intensity is very high and you want to limit or you want to create a bit of shading to not stress the plants too much, a bit of westerly and northwesterly planting will help provide a bit of afternoon shade to protect that garden from too much heat stress and evaporative water loss. The other thing that you could do is to have different types of gardens, such as a Mediterranean garden on the northern part of the property, which gets more sunshine, and a more European type garden on the western side, which is a little bit sheltered from the harsher conditions in summer and will produce a longer yield of green type crops during summer with this more sheltered position. So you could site different types of gardens in different areas of your property. So soil type is another main consideration. So what sandy soils will generally be quite alkaline and grow things like brassicas quite well. Be free draining, not hold on to nutrients that easily, so you'll need to add a lot of compost to that type of soil to provide the nutrients required by seasonal type of vegetables. So no-dig gardening is one of the common approaches to the setup of a kitchen garden, and the benefits of a no-dig garden is that you're not impacting the soil life. You're layering on top of that different materials in which you're going to garden upon, and some of the benefits with doing that is that you don't disturb the seed bank, so you're not bringing up to the surface any seeds which will germinate. So don't disturb the seed bank. You don't disturb the soil biology, so you're not breaking up the fungi hyphae that are in the soil, or killing earthworms, or kind of breaking down the structure of the soil, so you don't disturb soil life. And you don't disturb the structure of the soil. And also it works no matter what your soil is like. Even if it's just plain concrete, you can do a layered type no-dig garden on just bare concrete site, just by layering different composting materials on top of just the concrete, particularly if it's got a bit of an incline on it, and it will just drain away any excess water and nutrients from that garden site. It can work quite well on a concrete site, but more commonly it's on soil that you just don't disturb. So it can be applied to any site. And you're also growing your vegetables in the best possible kind of combination of choice composts and mulches and manures that you have picked and combined to the best effect to grow the particular crops that you're interested in. So you can add the optimal soil conditions for the particular crop you're growing. The drawbacks is that it's quite resource intensive. There's a lot of materials that you need to bring into the site to be able to set up that garden, so it uses a lot of resources. For the soil life to integrate into that no-dig garden, they've often got to break down the layers that you've added to it, particularly the layers that you add down to the bottom to prevent the weed seeds from germinating. It takes a while for the soil life to break all that down and integrate your composts and other materials that you've added into the rest of the soil. So sort of a process in that could be 3-4 months, depending on the temperature and rainfall and how much life is already in the soil. It can take a few months for soil life to colonize. And because of that, you might get an initial growth of your crops due to the nutrients that are already in the soil, particularly if it's nutrient-rich compost and things. But for the ongoing production of that soil, you really need to integrate the soil life into it and have those processes running smoothly within the soil to maintain a steady state of nutrient recycling within that soil. It can be quite time and labour expensive as well. So instead of growing immediately in the soil, maybe breaking it up with a fork or a rototiller and planting it in there with a few compost and things added to boost up the fertility, you've got to layer everything down, and we'll go through the process in a second how you set it up, but there's a lot of time and labour involved with setting it up effectively. I guess one of the other benefits is you can plant in immediately, and of course there's no weeds because you're growing in all these imported materials. So there's the benefits typically do outweigh the drawbacks, but it's a site-specific thing. So if you've got lots of resources and it's close to the house, so the labour and time is not so much of an issue because you're frequenting those areas anyway, and you've got lots of resources, and it's a small space, so you don't want to apply this technique to a big space. But as long as all those things are there to address these drawbacks, then the benefits are great, and it allows you to get started growing your vegetables in a good healthy state quickly. You can set it up and you can be growing very quickly. So the process you go through with doing this is initially you will often layer it with cardboard or newspaper, and making sure you get good overlap with the pieces of cardboard and newspaper you apply, and watering it regularly. So you don't need it like soaking wet, but you want it to be nice and damp, and that will help hold down the water and create a nice smooth surface there, so that when you add other materials on top, it's not going to be lifting up and creating gaps. So the idea with the, so this is newspaper or cardboard, and that's creating a physical barrier to stop any seeds that are already in the soil from germinating up through it. So it's a physical barrier to weeds, and that means you get the benefit of having no weeds when you first set up this garden for at least the first season, and you might get airborne weed seeds coming in that you'll need to address in the second season, but for that first season it should be pretty weed free using this technique. So first step is to layer the newspaper and wet. You then want to add your materials onto it. If they're quite nutrient rich materials, it's best to put them on the bottom. So any nutrient rich, and that could be manures, it could be half broken down compost, depending on how deep the other layers are, it could be just kitchen scraps that haven't even composted yet. And then you want to add a bit of soil biology, so you want to add a compost layer, and that would preferably have some soil biology in it. And then on top of that, you're planting your vegetables, and they're best often planted at a seedling stage. So you grow them to about 10 centimetres in height in your glass house often, and give them a bit of a head start in the season by growing them in that warmer condition. And then you take your seedling and you plant it out into your no-dig garden, so seedling. And then you might add drip lines after that to keep them well watered during summer. So that would be an irrigation system attached to your tap with various drip lines, and a drip line is just holes in a irrigation tube which you set your irrigation to a certain time, so that every day it might go on for an hour and deliver a litre of water per drip line to each line of plants. So it's a way of irrigating those plants effectively. And then mulches on the top, so to maintain the moisture and improve the habitat for the soil life and stop the plants from, or stop the water from evaporating from the soil so easily, and to help improve the habitat for the soil life. A good mulch is pretty essential to get all those things working well. So that's the process with setting up a no-dig garden. And yeah, the benefits can be that you're getting gardening quite quickly, but drawbacks obviously that best applied to a small space because of the resources and the time and the labour involved with setting it up.